Part 1. Legends and Tales Told by the Saints. Tales 1 through 10. 1. Fools take no advice. None so deaf as those who will not hear. Proverb. Once upon a time there was a foolish merchant. He loaded a sack of wheat on one side of his horse and balanced it with a sack of sand on the other side so that the horse would not feel any discomfort. A poor man, watching him loading the horse, asked him, "Sir, may I ask you what you're doing?" The merchant replied, "On one side I have put wheat, and on the other sand, to balance the load." "Would it not be better," asked the passer-by, "if you divided the sack of wheat into 2 equal parts, and put one on each side?" "Now, my man, I have a question for you. Just tell me, how much wealth do you have?" the merchant retorted in a huff. "Nothing except myself," the man replied. "Then do not talk to me," replied the horseman testily. "Keep your fancy theories to yourself, lest I too become a poor man like you." Fools are unwilling to take counsel. Saints give us advice, but we pay no heed to them. 2. The Inviolable Law. Whatever we sow, it is that we shall reap. This life is a field of actions. Guru Arjan. Bali, as it is told in the Ramayana, had performed many arduous penances, and thereby earned the boon that whoever came to fight with him would lose half of his strength to him. Thus Bali's strength always increased, while that of his enemy was taken away. It was for this reason that whenever his enemy, Sugriv, went to war with him, Sugriv was always defeated. Now Lord Ram was well aware of Bali's boon, and it so happened that after Sugriv came to him, asking for his assistance against Bali, Ram hid himself behind a tree and shot Bali with an arrow. While Bali was dying, he said to Ram, "I am absolutely innocent of any wrong done towards you, and have never harmed you. Accordingly, Lord Ram, you will have to pay for this deed in your next life." In their next lives, Ram was incarnated as Lord Krishna, and Bali as a member of the Bhil tribe. Sometime after the great battle of Mahabharat, Lord Krishna was sleeping in a forest with one foot resting on the other. As a sign of a highly evolved soul, he had a lotus mark on the sole of each foot. The tribesmen, seeing these marks sparkling in the sun, mistook the marks for the eyes of a deer, aimed an arrow, and shot Lord Krishna. When he came to pick up his prey, he realized his terrible mistake. With folded hands, he asked the dying Krishna for forgiveness. Krishna told him of the incident in their previous lives and explained that what had happened was inevitable. He was not to blame, but he had to repay the debt of his karmas. The law of karma is inexorable and inviolable. None, not even incarnations of gods, can escape it. 3. The Pangs of Separation. I have with me a whole treasure of learning, but where is the sigh of the morning and the tear of the early night? Khwaja Hafiz. One winter's day, Sheikh Shibli was sitting with his disciples around a fire when a smoldering log of wood caught his attention. As the log was slightly wet, the heat was driving drops of liquid from it at one end. After a moment or two of reflection, Shibli said to his disciples, "How can you, who profess to have deep love and devotion for the Lord, truly say that you are burning in the pangs of separation from Him? I see no tears of sadness or longing in your eyes. Look at this little log, how it burns and cries. I say to you all, learn a lesson from this humble piece of wood." 4. The Mason Wasp. With the name in the heart, one is exalted above all. Guru Arjan. In India, there is a myth associated with the Mason Wasp. This wasp lays each egg in a small chamber it constructs out of clay. It then finds a grub of some other species and places it in the chamber as food for its larvae and seals them both in. The adult insect keeps buzzing around the chamber until the young wasp matures and breaks free. The myth that grew out of this was that the wasp could transform the grub of a different species into a mason wasp purely by the powerful buzzing sound. It was believed that the wasp gives its attention to the grub in the cell. If that grub is receptive to the attention, it is then transformed by it and turned into a mason wasp. It then hatches from the cell, and both wasps fly away together. It is in this vein that Kabir Sahib says, "Put your mind in Simran, like the grub to the sound of the wasp. Once you abandon yourself, you become the one you love. If we meditate upon the Lord's name, we will merge with Him, we will become Him. Anyone who is filled with divine light himself becomes divine light. You become the image of the one you think about constantly." 5. The True Philanthropist. The servant does not continue in the house forever, the son continues forever. So if the Son makes you free, you will be free indeed. St. John. There was once a philanthropist who saw the dreadful condition of the prisoners in a jail and took pity on them. Noticing that they did not get sweet, cold water to drink, he sent them supplies of sugar and ice, thus improving their lot and leaving them happier. Another noble person came along and realized that the prisoners were fed coarse millet and poor quality food. He provided them with a regular supply of nourishing sweet dishes. This, too, made the prisoners happier. Then a third kind-hearted man, on seeing the prisoners in coarse and dirty clothes, arranged to have new uniforms made for them. This made them happier still. Each of these philanthropists helped the prisoners by improving their lot in one way or another, but the fact is that the prisoners still remained locked up inside the jail. A generous heart is indeed a noble quality, but we should understand that good deeds alone will never liberate us from our captivity in the world. We must be charitable, but our charity will not free anyone from the vast prison house of this creation. Now there was another kind man who came with the keys to the prison. He was able to unlock all the prison doors. He then said to the prisoners, "You are free. Go back to your homes." Of all of the philanthropists, who was the best? It was obviously the one who set the prisoners free. In the same way, the key to freedom from the prison-like world is Nam. Nam is obtained only from a perfect living master. 6. How saints change lives. Saints sing the praises of the masters because they take into their lap the worthless, the sinful, and the impure, and transform them into gems of purest light. Discourses on Sant. Once, during the rainy season, a group of holy men came to Kabir Sahib's house. There was not a scrap of bread in the house, nor did Kabir have even one coin in his pocket. Kabir was a weaver by trade, and had been unable to sell any of his cloth because it was the monsoon season. He asked his wife, Mai Loi, if she could buy some provisions on credit, as they could always clear the debt later. But the difficulty was, who would give credit to a poor weaver without a steady income? Mai Loi went from grocer to grocer without any luck. In the end, one grocer did agree to give her rations on credit, but, not knowing who she was, he put the condition that she spend the night with him. Mai Loi was upset by his lecherous intentions, but did not say anything. She brought the rations home and told Kabir about the deal that the merchant had proposed. That night, Kabir reminded Mai Loi about her promise to the merchant. He consoled her by saying that everything would be fine. As she was ready to leave for the grocer's place, he told her, "It is raining and the path is full of puddles. Wrap a blanket around yourself, and I shall carry you on my shoulders." The house was soon reached, and Mai Loi went inside, while Kabir waited for her outside the door. Delighted to see her and unable to believe his good fortune, the grocer nevertheless noticed that Mai Loi's slippers, despite the rain, had no mud on them and were not wet. "How is it that you walked through the muddy street," he asked, "and yet there is not a trace of mud on your slippers?" "There is nothing to wonder at," she replied. "My husband, Kabir Sahib, carried me here on his back, and is now waiting for me outside the door." On hearing the name of the great saint spoken, the grocer was suddenly overcome with shame. Going to the door, he begged Kabir to come inside and dry himself. Then, falling to his knees, he begged both Kabir and Mai Loi to grant him pardon. "Rise up, my good friend," said Kabir. "It is a rare man indeed who does not go astray." Kabir and his wife took their leave, and the grocer sat in his corner far into the night, pondering on what had happened. In the end, he came to the conclusion that there was only one good path to follow in this world, the path of discipleship. In the morning he sought out Kabir and became one of his most devoted disciples. 7. Why, O Lord? Do not be surprised at fortune's twists and turns. That wheel has told 1,000 tales before. Khwaja Hafiz. There was once a money-lender who was filled with an intense yearning to find a perfect master who could show him truth. At that time, Guru Nanak Sahib's fame had reached every part of India, and the money-lender longed to meet him, believing that the famous Guru might be able to initiate him into the secrets of spirituality. In his journey from place to place, it happened that Guru Nanak came at last to the money-lender's village. Settling down in the village, Guru Nanak blessed hundreds of people with initiation. Included among them was the money-lender. Close by the house of the money-lender, there lived one of his oldest and closest friends, Ram Das, a man who also was a money-lender. Hearing many stories about Guru Nanak, Ram Das was eager to attend one of his discourses, and one morning the two friends started out together to sit at the feet of the great light-bearer. On the way, Ram Das saw a pretty prostitute, and was so bewitched by her looks and manners that he decided to stay with her. "Why give up the bliss of heaven and go headlong into hellfire?" his friend said, in the hope of dissuading him. But all his arguments were of no avail. Ram Das stayed where he was, and his friend went on alone to the Satsang. The next day, the same thing happened, and it continued day after day, Ram Das staying with the prostitute, while his friend, becoming ever more devoted to Guru Nanak, went regularly to the Satsang. Every day the money-lender tried to bring his friend to the right path, but nothing he could say would induce Ram Das to give up his dissolute conduct. Now, after a month, the money-lender said to Ram Das, "Today is a day when the Sat Guru will distribute prasad. Give up your evil ways for once and come with me to the Satsang. No matter how sinful a person may be, I am told that attending the discourse of a saint gets rid of all one's fears and doubts, and when one has faith, the sins of many lives are washed away. In the name of friendship, come with me. You will then realize how profitable the company of the saint is, and what bliss you can enjoy." Ram Das, however, would have none of it. "You go to Satsang every day and earn great merit. Instead, I do evil. Let us see what we reap today as the result of our actions. Meet me at my house at noon, and we will then compare notes." So for the time being the two friends parted company. Ram Das went at once to the prostitute's house, but she had gone out. He walked moodily back to his own house and began to wait for his friend. But his friend was late, for he had been so fascinated by the discourse and the discussion afterwards that he stayed much longer than usual. While he was waiting, Ram Das began to pass the time by pushing his stick into the earth. The earth was soft, and after he had dug at it for some time, his stick struck an earthen pot with its mouth covered by a lid. When Ram Das removed the lid, he saw a sovereign lying on the top, and he quickly pulled the pot out of the earth, hoping to find it filled with sovereigns. To his great disappointment, he found that the pot contained only one sovereign, the rest of it being filled with pieces of charcoal. His only consolation was that he got one sovereign without working for it. Just then his friend arrived, limping along and apparently in considerable pain. "What has happened to you?" asked Ram Das. "Why, of all things I stepped on a long thorn," said his friend. "As luck would have it, it broke off under the skin, and this has made it much more painful." Ram Das laughed heartily at this. "Oh, brother, you can now compare for yourself the fruits of going to Satsang and my evil act. I have received a gift of a golden sovereign, but you have stepped on a thorn. Are you still going to sing the praises of Satsang?" These words, though uttered by someone who had no inkling of the joys of the discourses of a saint, nevertheless put doubts in the mind of the moneylender, and made him ask himself how God ran his world, why the evil prospered, while those who were trying to lead good lives suffered. Why, oh Lord, he asked, why is it that despite his evil actions, my friend has been given a sovereign, whereas I, who am trying to love you with all my heart, have been given a painful injury? Is there any good, after all, in going to the Guru's satsang? Should I keep on trying to lead the spiritual life? Or is it all a mirage, a palace in the air without substance that may vanish any moment? After discussing the matter, he and Ram Das hit upon the idea of going to the Satguru and asking him if he could give them an explanation for this riddle. When they told their story to Guru Nanak, he saw at once, by means of his inner vision, the past lives of the two men and the causes of their present experiences. "Sit down, brothers," he told them, "and I will explain these things to you. In your last life, my friend," the Guru said to Ram Das, "you gave a total of one sovereign in charity. Your karma for this act in this life was to receive a pot filled to the brim with sovereigns. But due to your actions, each day you did the evil deed, one of the sovereigns turned into a piece of charcoal. This morning, by accident, you did not do an evil deed, and as a result you got one sovereign. Otherwise that also would have turned into a piece of charcoal." The Satguru then turned to the other moneylender. "You, in your last life, were a despot and a tyrant, a monarch by whose orders many thousands of people were killed. You killed others in pointless battles. For these deeds you should have paid in this life by being tortured and hanged. But because you attended satsang and met the Master, the payment for your karmas has been very much reduced. How did you pay for all the murders you committed? By a pinprick instead of death by torture." Upon hearing the Guru's words, the two friends fell at his feet and begged for forgiveness of their sins. In due time, both were purified and flooded with the inner light of God's word, and both attained union with the Lord. See how satsang and the glory of the Guru are precious beyond measure, that punishment by hanging becomes a pinprick. 8. The king and the fruit of perpetual youth. The false are in love with the false and have forgotten their Creator. Whom to love and make one's friend when the whole world is moving on. Guru Nanak. King Bharatri once told his wife about a woman who had committed sati, dying on her husband's funeral pyre, as was the custom in those days in certain parts of India. His wife replied that it was curious that the woman was able to survive the separation from her beloved until the time of building the pyre and burning it, that really she should have died the very moment that her husband died. King Bharatri considered this a very noble thought, but all the same he wanted to test the devotion of his own wife. One day he went hunting, and having killed a deer, he soaked his clothes in its blood and sent the blood-soaked clothes to his palace, with the message that he had been killed by a tiger. When the wife heard this, she fainted and died instantly. When the king returned to his palace, he felt extremely sad that he had lost such a devoted wife, but within a short time he married again. Some time later, a saint visited the court and gave King Bharatri a unique fruit which had the property of making an old person young forever. The king, believing that his second wife was as loyal as his first, gave the fruit to her as a special token of his regard for her, explaining to her its virtues. Unfortunately, his second wife turned out to be just the reverse of his first. The queen was enamored of the chief of police, and she passed the fruit on to him. This man did not love the queen, but was himself infatuated with a prostitute, and so he gave the fruit to her. When the prostitute learned about the special qualities of the fruit, she thought to herself that her whole life had been spent in sin, and if she were to eat this fruit, she would simply prolong her sinful life. Therefore, why should she not give the fruit to the king, who was so virtuous, noble, and great, and in whose kingdom everyone was so happy? When she gave the fruit to the king, he recognized it at once and asked her, with consternation in his voice, "From where did you get this fruit?" "It was given to me by the chief of police," she told him. The king sent for the chief of police and, pointing to the fruit, demanded, "How did you get possession of this fruit?" Naturally enough, the chief of police was very reluctant to tell the truth, but eventually he made a clean breast of the whole matter and told the king, "The fruit was given to me by the queen." As King Bharatri pondered over the sorry business, he cursed himself for having tested his faithful wife, and thinking of his second wife, he said to himself, "How scornfully this dissolute queen has repaid my honest love. To think she had a king as her husband, yet she went to one of my ministers, the chief of police. And how unfortunate was he! He had the queen as a concubine, yet had to run after a common prostitute. What kind of world can this be where such things happen? And what kind of people live in it? How many are base, and how few are noble?" Thinking in this manner, King Bharatri renounced his throne and devoted the remainder of his life to the worship of the Lord. 9. Sant Kabir and Indumati. No true master has ever claimed that he was a master. They are unique models of simplicity and modesty. Discourses on Sant. Queen Indumati was a devoted disciple of her master, Kabir, the weaver saint of Kashi, now known as Varanasi. When her soul left her body for the last time, Kabir took her on the final voyage to Sachkhand. To her amazement, she saw that the ruler of that supreme region was none other than Kabir Sahib himself. "If you had told me in the mortal world," she remonstrated with him, "that you were the Lord Almighty, I would not have had to work so hard at my meditation." "But you would not have believed me," said Kabir. "You would have just said that this is a man who claims to be the Supreme Lord." If saints talked about who they really are, people would not believe them. They do not reveal the power that they are endowed with. People have no idea who they are and where they come from. If they knew, do you think they would have permitted Guru Nanak Sahib and so many other great saints to labor so hard? 10. Bhikh, Bhikh, Bhikh. I live only to do your will. My lips move only to praise you. O Lord, whoever comes to truly know you casts out everything but you. Ansari of Herat. In a small village called Piran Kalyere, not far from Delhi, there once lived a saint by the name of Bhikh Sahib. It happened that one day one of his disciples was walking along the street constantly repeating his master's name, saying Bhikh, 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 over and over again. A Qazi passing by asked him, "Who are you, my good man?" "I am Bhikh," the disciple answered. "Who is your murshid?" The Qazi then asked him. "Bhikh," was the reply. "Who is your God?" was the Qazi's next question. "Bhikh," was again the reply. Both the Qazi and the crowd that had gathered were highly displeased by the disciple's answers, so they dragged him off to the mosque to make him recant. Once again he was asked the same questions, but his replies remained the same. Who indeed can change the mind of a lover? Greatly annoyed, the Qazi told the crowd that this disciple of Bhikh was quite clearly a non-believer, and as such he should be hanged. The Qazi then arranged to have the disciple taken to King Akbar at Delhi, who would sit in judgment on him. Akbar the Great asked the same 3 questions, and in reply the disciple said, "O King, whatever I have belongs entirely to Bhikh Sahib. Without him I am nothing and have nothing." Akbar, a perceptive and God-fearing ruler, realized at once that the disciple was delirious with love for the Lord, and as such he knew it would be improper to put him to death. At this time his kingdom was suffering from a great drought, so the king asked the disciple, "Could your master help the countryside by making it rain?" "Sir, I will go and ask," the disciple answered. The king was very hopeful that a master who could inspire such love could make it rain. "Please go at once," Akbar said, and ordered his immediate release. "Sir, he will run away," said the Qazi. "Let him run away," replied the king. The disciple went into the jungle and prayed, "Bhikh, my beloved, the king wishes me to entreat you for rain for his parched lands. Everything happens by your will. Only you know what benefits us." There was immediately a heavy downpour which gladdened the hearts of everyone. On the next day the disciple returned to the court of the king. "Sir, were you satisfied by the rain?" he asked his monarch. Akbar was filled with gratitude. "Yes, yes, good man," he told him. "It has revived the crops in every district. No amount of thanks would be sufficient." "Bhikh did it," said the disciple. Akbar paused for a moment, but he was filled with curiosity. "Please tell me now, who is this Bhikh of whom you speak so often?" he asked. "He is my master," the disciple answered humbly. "Tell me if you want anything," said the king. "Name your reward." "I want only Bhikh," replied the disciple. Moved by the disciple's intense love for his master, the king decreed, "I hereby grant your master 21 villages," and handed the disciple a scroll. "Will you kindly carry it to him, together with my thanks and gratitude?" To everyone's surprise, the disciple immediately handed the scroll back to the king. "Sir, these villages would have no value in my master's eyes," he told the king, "for they are merely temporal things of this world. I must humbly decline, your majesty." Akbar was well enough acquainted with the ways of holy men to understand. Nevertheless, he sent some members of his court to deliver the scroll to Bhikh. A few days later, when the disciple met his master, Bhikh Sahib told him, "My son, you asked only for rain, but that was the time when you could have asked for anything, and you would have received it, for you were in communion with me, and I was in communion with the Supreme Lord." "What would I have done with anything else?" the disciple replied humbly. "I want you alone."